Welcome to the Academy of Esports Podcast. I'm your host, James O'Hagan. On this week's episode of the podcast, I won't be interviewing anybody. It's been a while since I've done a solo episode, and I wanted to take this opportunity this week to reflect on a few things, to kind of reflect on where we are, and to kind of look at where things have come in the last 2 years, but also to take the opportunity to look at and provide some insights into some new thoughts, I guess I could say, that are going out about esports and education that I think are very critical for us to look at this time, because we need to make sure that as we are becoming more data informed in our work in esports and education, that we are looking at the entire picture of research as things are going through. So let's look at where we've come in the last 2 years. So in the last 2 years, the Academy of Esports has stuck to its core tenets. It's 5 things. Number 1, we're working to redefine athletic culture in our schools. We want to, number 2, diversify opportunity for student participation in our schools. Number 3, we want to promote good mental and physical health in our schools. And number 4, we want to increase career and collegiate scholarship pathways for our scholar gamers, so that they can use esports to get them to that next level. And number 5, and most importantly, we want to make sure that through esports and education that we are honoring the importance of play. And I have had a tremendous opportunity in these last 2 years to not only share my thoughts and reflections from my 6+ years now experience involved in scholastic esports, but also connect you with other people, other thought leaders, other people who are sharing their ideas in esports and education. I've had been tremendously blessed, I guess you could say, to have had such great guests on my podcast. People who I never thought I would connect with ever. People who I read about, people I see on Twitter, but never really engaged, and people so willing to give of their time to come on here. And what's also fantastic is when I go out to conferences, when I go to speak to groups, or I get an email that says, "Hey, I was listening to your podcast." It's great to know that people are listening. It's so humbling to hear that people are listening to the podcast and using this as a not only as a thing to listen to, but they refer other people to it as a primary resource, and that is very meaningful to me. And so it goes without saying that the work that I've put into this podcast, sometimes I can be a little long-winded. I can't speak in 30-minute or 30-second segments. Sometimes I can't speak in 30-minute segments. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get an idea out. And Twitter doesn't always lend itself to be that conduit of sharing the breadth of the ideas that sometimes I want to get out there. Other platforms such as Instagram and TikTok kind of don't allow me to do the same because, again, of limitations that there is there. So I use my podcast to really be more long form. Now, we have started I have started stepping into using Twitch a little bit more. If you have not checked it out, twitch.tv/TAO Esports is live and working, and it's a little bit different format than what I do for the podcast. The podcast is certainly a little more formal. Try not to have, there are some laughs along the way. I don't want to make it sound like that I'm not trying to have fun while I do this, but the topic to me of esports and education is something that I take very close to my heart. It is something that I have seen the transformations that kids make through their involvement with esports and education, and it is something that I don't just want to have be monetized or packaged or put into a box, because, again, as I've talked about over the years, everything that we do in esports and education for each one of our kids, for each one of our scholar gamers, should be something that is unique to them. One program does not necessarily translate from one school to another. So we know that there is a high level of customization that takes place with esports and education. And as I've shared with you my ideas, I don't just try to get up here and just pontificate and speak off the top. I try to be really, again, data informed about what I am sharing with you. Well, it's important that we are vigilant now in this time more than ever. In the past 2 years, while I have spoken on this topic to an extent, there has been a tremendous growth in esports and education and esports in general, especially as we are coming into this, I guess we could call it the age of COVID. I don't want to say we're coming out of COVID quite yet, because as we look at the data, there's still hot spots around the world. But in this age of COVID, we have seen the growth of esports, where I wouldn't necessarily call it as much growth as more attention being paid to esports, because it has been one of the few things where people can still participate by and large from where they are, whether it's on a mobile device, whether it is on a console or on a PC. As long as there is access to the internet and a device and a game and a story to be told, or a game to be played, or a tournament to happen, there is access to do that. And I have spoken about the passion that I guess I have for those kids who are not currently able to, especially in my own school district in the city of Racine and in the Racine County area, where we do have about 30% of my scholar gamers who do not have quality internet access to their home. I do struggle with, as the growth is happening, and making sure that those kids are having their opportunities and their through esports, that we develop some equity in that. But not here to speak about that so much today, but again, talking more about the growth. And I've spoken about the rush to implementation, how there's a lot of people who are running into this space right now because, again, there is a ton of attention being paid to it. There's a ton of opportunity here for people to monetize what is happening with esports, not just at the pro scene, but also at the collegiate and the amateur or high school, middle school level, even elementary in some cases. But what's also starting to happen is, as more people are rushing in, just as there's rush to implement programs, there's people who are beginning to develop followings and opportunities to speak on this subject who don't necessarily have qualifications to speak on this. Whenever I share something with you, whether it's a piece of data or it's something that's fact-based, I want to make sure that I'm giving you the whole picture. The intellectual honesty and transparency is something that is core to my beliefs. As I'm working on my dissertation, and it has been a struggle to work on my dissertation over the years, because I see so many great things here with esports. It's hard to sit down and focus. It is hard to keep myself centered on one topic when I see so many tremendous, wonderful things happening with esports. But I always make sure to try to share with you the source data, because I believe in the importance of esports. I don't want it to be something that, again, can be turned into something that it's not. Again, to kind of give you some backstory, there's a video that I saw recently, and it was a very short video. Nothing too, I guess you could say, threatening by it. It wasn't anything that was done maliciously. It wasn't anything that was an attack. But the story was basically this, and it was about a minute long, and it was produced by somebody, and I don't want to link to it because, again, I don't necessarily feel it was malicious intent, but I saw just how easily it is for people right now to step into this space and speak from a position without having done the work. And when I say that, it's not because it's a feeling of jealousy. It's more of, again, I hold scholastic esports very close to my heart. It is my passion. It is the thing that if you said what's the hill that you're going to die on, this is the hill that would be my intellectual hill that I would die on, because I see, again, the importance of all this. But in the video, the person who was speaking was a parent and was speaking from a position of being a parent, and the position being of the question being, why do you let your kids play video games and participate in esports? And the thing that she points to is a Stanford study. And this Stanford study was done focusing on chess players, Grandmaster chess players. And she prefaced this with, why would you let your kids participate in playing video games and esports? Don't they need exercise? And as part of the story, she said, well, I let my kids participate in esports and video games because, according to this study, Grandmaster Chess Players can burn up to 6,000 calories a day. And when I saw that, I thought, well, that's a very interesting claim. I'm sure that there's probably more to that claim, and I would like to know more about it, but that's where the story stopped. That's where her story stopped telling the importance of this story or what was behind this story. What was concerning to me was the thousands of times that this video had been seen online. When I went through the comments, I looked at the comments very closely, and I saw very carefully how not just adults, but other kids read that and said, oh, I'm going to show this to my parents to make sure that they know that when I'm playing video games that I'm burning calories. Well, and you may say, O'Hagan, what is your expertise to even talk about physiology or any of this in any regard? While I do have a bachelor's degree in elementary education, a master's degree in ed leadership, and I'm working on my PhD in instructional technology and design with a focus on self-determination theory, way back in my bachelor's, I also got a minor in coaching. And my coaching minor involved me having to take physiology and anatomy courses to learn about training and training cycles and regimens and study those things. And I remember one time being hooked up to a VO2 machine so I could get my max volume, and back when I could run, and was playing a tremendous amount of rugby. I actually had a fantastic VO2 max. It was surprising to me. But when I look at a study like that just says, hey, 6,000 calories burned, sure, I'm going to let my kids play video games, realize that as I'm standing here talking to you, my respiration is up. I'm sure my heart rate is up. I'm sure my blood pressure is up. While I'm doing this podcast, while I'm standing here in front of the camera, I am burning calories right now. I don't know how many calories I'm burning, but because I am doing just this simple bit of work, I am burning more calories than where I was about a half hour ago preparing for this podcast. So I dug into the story a little bit, and I want to read to you I want to give you the full weight of this, how important it is that we look below the simple statistic. Again, it is so important right now that we are data informed, that we don't just take one piece of data and keep that as our core. Again, when I speak to people about esports and education, I don't just speak about one study. I don't just speak about one instance of something. I try to find multiple studies. I try to find multiple peer-reviewed sources to share with you so that people, when they go back and speak to their school districts, they can speak to different varying levels of people when they talk about this stuff. So I pulled the story from ESPN. I thought did the best to break down this story beyond the claim of 6,000 calories. And even the title of the story, I guess, can kind of throw some people off. The title of the story is The Grandmaster Diet: How to Lose Weight While Barely Moving. Okay. So you may look at that and go, oh, that sounds exactly like what we would have in esports. Our kids sit there in chairs, especially at tournaments where maybe you're playing 2 or 3 matches a day. You could be sitting there for 2 to 6 hours, depending on what type of game you're playing. So there's a high level of sitting, but there's a high level of activity that's taking place. So I broke this down into 2 parts: the problem and the work. So let's talk about the problem here first. The 6,000 calorie claim. Robert Sapolsky, who studies stress in primates at Stanford University, says a chess player can burn up to 6,000 calories a day while playing in a tournament, 3 times what an average person consumes in a day. So we, as human beings, regular adult human beings, will burn about 2,000 a day. Based on breathing rates, which triple during competition, blood pressure, which elevates, and muscular contractions before, during, and after major tournaments, Sapolsky suggests that grandmasters' stress responses to chess are on par with what elite athletes experience. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. To quote, grandmasters sustain elevated blood pressure for hours in the range found in competitive marathon runners, Sapolsky says. Okay, so we have an understanding of that, yet yes, grandmaster chess players. Now, mind you, we are talking about the top 1% of 1% chess players in the world are burning up to 6,000 calories during a day, during a tournament, not just on average, not every day, but during a tournament. The story goes on. It all combines to produce an average weight loss of 2 pounds a day, or about 10 to 12 pounds over the course of a 10-day tournament, in which each grandmaster might play 5 or 6 times. The effect can be off-putting to the players themselves, even if it's expected. Now, mind you, 2 pounds a day. It's relatively safe for a human being, if they're on a weight loss regimen, to lose 2 pounds a week. 2 pounds a day is a dangerous weight loss. Story goes on. Fabiano Caruana, I can't say this right. Caruana, there, I said it right. Number 2 player in the world, Fabio Caruana, whose base weight is 135 pounds, drops to 120 to 125 pounds. Sometimes I've weighed myself after tournaments and I've seen the scale drop below 120, he says, and that's when I get mildly scared. Now, juxtapose the parent who has thousands of views of a video promoting esports and the weight loss, I guess you could say, effects of video game play in esports, to Mr. Caruana's response that at the end of tournaments, my weight loss can be so much that I get mildly scared. That's not exactly the kind of correlation that we want between the two, but the story goes on. Grandmasters in competition are subjected to a constant torrent of mental stress. That stress, in turn, causes their heart rates to increase, which, in turn, forces their bodies to produce more energy to, in turn, produce more oxygen. It is, according to Marcus Rachel, a neurologist, I'll get it right, at Washington University in St. Louis, and Philip Cryer, a metabolism expert at the school, a vicious, destructive cycle. So it is a vicious, destructive cycle is what they are seeing. The mental stress, the elevated heart rates, the elevated oxygen consumption is something that they see as dangerous. Story continues. Meanwhile, players also eat less during the tournaments, simply because they don't have the time or the appetite. The simple explanation is when they're thinking about chess, they're not thinking about food, says Ewan C. McNay, an assistant professor of psychology in the behavioral neuroscience program at the University of Albany. Stress also leads to altered and disturbed sleep patterns, which in turn cause more fatigue and can lead to more weight loss. A brain operating on less sleep, even by just 1 hour, requires more energy to stay awake during the chess game. Some grandmasters report dreaming about chess, agonizing over what they could have done differently for hours in their sleep, and waking up exhausted. To combat it all, today's players have begun to incorporate strict food and fitness regimens to increase oxygen supply to the brain during tournaments, prevent sugar-related crashes, and sustain their energy. Physical fitness and brain performance are tied together, and it shouldn't be a surprise that grandmasters are out there trying to look like soccer players, says grandmaster and chess commentator Maurice Ashley. Just the opening to that story. If I focused on the opening paragraph where it's, hey, they burn 6,000 calories, and I see that, and I take that to my scholar gamers, ignoring that the cause of that weight loss, that calorie burn, is intense stress. I mean, my number 3 goal on the Academy of Esports podcast is promote good mental and physical health. If I stood up here and just told you, hey, 6,000 calories burned, go out and let your kids sit down and play those video games, I should hope that people would respond negatively to that or ask why. I would hope that doctors and physical therapists, people like Dr. Drew Schwartz, who I've had on here, Jake Middleton, Dan Himmelstein, who look at this, who work as work in this field, I hope would start to question what I'm doing. The Gamer Doc, gosh, I hope she would blow me up on that, because I can't stand up here and say 6,000 calories burned without telling you the whole rest of the story. And it is important to hear the whole rest of the story, because it ties in exactly with what we are focusing to do in esports through promoting good mental and physical health. So there is work that is taking place, and I want to share with you some of that work, because again, what's something that we could do right now as we're going into the summer and preparing our scholar gamers for a return in the fall, whatever form that may be, is that we can start talking to them and sharing these stories with them about, again, sleep, drinking more water, regulating your diet, getting some form of exercise. A body in motion is a brain in motion. So I've said that before many times when we talked about even our chairs and how they're set up. So let's continue on with the story just so we can talk about the work that is being done by these Grandmaster chess players. In 2017, Magnus Carlsen realized he had a problem. The reigning world number one for 4 years felt his grasp on the title loosening. He was still winning most tournaments, but his matches were lasting longer, the victories seemingly less assured. He was beginning to wane in the last hour of games. He noticed younger players catching up to him. Carlsen had relied on a mix of half orange juice, half water for an energy boost since he was a child. But now, in his late 20s, his body was no longer breaking down the sugar as quickly, leading to sugar crashes. Since then, he has trained his body for chess down to the very last detail. Before tournaments, he works out for hours, running on the treadmill, perfecting asanas on his yoga mat, playing soccer with his friends. Before the World Championship last year, he went skiing every day and tweeted that it strengthened his legs and his willpower to get to the finish line. He hired a personal chef, Magnus Forsell, who travels with him to ensure he's eating the right combination of proteins, carbs, and calcium. So, in these days, during tournaments, Carlsen focuses on relaxing and conserving energy instead of training. Caruana spends at least 3 hours before a match preparing his moves, but Carlsen does only 15 to 30 minutes of prep. His reasoning, last-minute preparations are an unnecessary use of energy. So when we're looking at this, when we're looking at the work that these grandmasters are doing, they realize that burning 6,000 calories isn't a positive. Burning 6,000 calories to them is a negative. They see it at that high level as being something that they have to specifically be mindful of, and they have to train and eat specifically for those moments. So as we get more of these studies, if somebody makes to you that outrageous claim, that claim of hey, esports can burn, I've seen these Grandmaster chess players, they burn 6,000 calories. Our video gamers and our esports kids, they got to be burning similar. Understand the whole part of that story. When we talk about promoting good mental and physical health, we have to think about, why is that happening? Again, in this case, it's mental stress. It's because they're so focused on match play that they're not eating properly, or they're eating the wrong things. I know when we interviewed Mark Deppy quite a while ago here on the Academy of Esports Podcast, he spoke of that his players do not drink energy drinks, they only drink water. And there's a reason for it. If you ever watched the ESPN show that they did on the UCI esports team and you saw them sit down to dinner, that entire table was filled. It looked like a salad bar more than anything else. And so it's important to get the whole story. So as we move forward, I'll give you another story. Seeing the physical tolls that some of these matches can have on our scholar gamers, on our kids. I remember, I think I told this story once before of, I had a team of Overwatch players and I was subbing in that day for their general manager who could not be there. And it was a 5-on-6 and they decided to play 5-on-6. My team was down one of our scholar gamers. And what was amazing was I saw them take the first match against the school that they were playing. But again, they were 5-on-6. At the end of that first match, their energy was up. They were really amped up. They were surprised that they had taken a match against a fully complemented team. But what I saw was in the second match, as they were getting close to, I think the second match was very close. I think they barely lost. But at the end of that second match, they looked exhausted. I mean, they couldn't sit up. They were slumping in their chairs. You could see the mental toll that being down one player had taken on them. And by that third deciding match, what had happened was they just got routed. I mean, it wasn't even close. So it hopefully highlights the importance of making sure that, yes, data will say, as kids are sitting there, playing video games or competing in esports events, that they are burning calories. But the whole of the story is that we still need to talk about making sure that their eating habits are good and that they're eating the right kinds of foods and teaching kids how to eat those right things. We need to push the importance of drinking water, not drinking energy drinks or things that are going to cause sugar crashes. We want to make sure that we talk to them about the importance of sleep. One of the things that I know that has come, I guess you could say, as a blessing, out of COVID, even though I know it's been tremendously hard on a lot of kids, is that some of the kids who I've talked to enjoy the fact that they can work on school and sleep as they need to. They're not getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning to get to school. It starts at 7 a.m. And staying for hours on day and then having 6 hours of homework at night. And I hope that the lessons that we are picking up from that are going to carry over into our fall year, whatever our fall year looks like. A lot of us don't even know yet what school is going to look like for us or our Scholar Gamers, or what our competition is going to look like, if it's going to be from home or from our arenas where we play. But we can't stop promoting good mental and physical health. We have to continue that conversation, even though if it sometimes falls on deaf ears. And even especially if there's somebody out there who tells one part of the story, but doesn't tell you the rest of the story. That will do it for this week on the Academy of Esports. I've been your host, James O'Hagan. Esports are organized competitive video games allowing schools to redefine their athletic culture, diversify opportunities for student participation, promote good physical and mental health, increase collegiate scholarship pathways, and play games. We can never forget the importance of play. The mission of the Academy of Esports is to support these ideals. The vision of the Academy of Esports is for all students to experience the fun and joy of playing competitive video games. You may follow me on Twitter at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JIMOHAGAN, and through the Academy of Esports account at TAO Esports. It's a great way to get the latest blog posts, podcast episodes, and news coming out of esports and education. And remember, you can continue your engagement by going to www.taoesports.com. You can also connect through Facebook at www.facebook.com/TAO Esports. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to our time again next week.